I had a terrific trip to Afghanistan over the last 3 days, and as always, I focused on the transition from the coalition-led operations, 50 nations participating, to the Afghan security force-led operations. And I'm pleased to report that we're making, I think, very strong progress, and I remain cautiously optimistic about how things are going in Afghanistan. Let me tell you where we went. We came into Kabul. We were briefed there by General Allen and his team, and spent a good deal of time with General Bolger, who leads the NATO training mission Afghanistan effort. Then we thought, let's go see how it's going in the field. So first we went south to Helmand, to the provinces where we've seen the greatest level of violence throughout the 10 years of this period. I can tell you that 3 years ago, we had 10 coalition soldiers for every one Afghan soldier in the field, in the south and southwest of Afghanistan. Today we have 2, and in many places 3 Afghans for every one coalition. So that transition is going extremely well. We're seeing the Afghans taking the lead in almost 50% of the operations conducted, and we are partnered with them on virtually every operation, well over 90%. So in the south we see strong gains throughout the region, and that's particularly noteworthy because this is the heartland of the insurgency. Then we thought, let's take a look at a different area altogether. So we went north to Mazar-e Sharif, up on the northern border of Afghanistan, beyond the Hindu Kush. There we had a chance to see where the regional command, led by a German officer, where he has 4,000 German troops, over 1,000 American troops, troops from many of the Nordic nations, including Sweden, most notably, as well as those from Eastern Europe, such as the Hungarians. A terrific international coalition up north. Here we see the same level of results. I had a chance there to be briefed by the Afghan Corps commander, General Visa, and by the Afghan police 3-star commander for the northern zone, General Babajan. The two of them were strong briefers, outlined their efforts, gave us a very coherent picture of what's going on, and clearly are officers in command of the situation and very much in the leadership role in this northern province. So overall, this transition in Afghanistan, which is just crucial to our success, the transition from coalition forces to Afghan security forces, is proceeding well. And that was the centerpiece of my recent trip. And again, I came away because of that quite optimistic. I'll conclude by saying today in Afghanistan, 50% of the population is under Afghan security lead. And just 2 days ago, I signed the paperwork approving a shift to 75% of the Afghan population under Afghan security lead. Now that has to be approved, of course, by the Afghan government. They're the final authority on that. But I'm confident they will approve that, and we're moving forward in a very positive way. Overall, I remain cautiously optimistic in Afghanistan. Well, I think the summit is going to be a wonderful moment for the alliance. It's going to be held in America for the first time in over 20 years. It'll be a nice opportunity for the United States to see NATO on its own soil. We're going to have the heads of state and government from the 28 NATO countries and many of the 22 additional partner countries who are with us in Afghanistan today. I think that's significant. And when we look at a total of 50 troop contributing nations in Afghanistan, many of them coming with their head of state or government to discuss the challenges, you know that Afghanistan will be at the top of the agenda for the summit. And in particular, because things are proceeding reasonably well now, we're going to look at Afghanistan post-2014, after we complete the transition to Afghan-led security throughout the country. And I'm quite confident that the nations will come together and indicate a strong willingness to continue to engage in Afghanistan with financial support for the Afghan security forces, with trainers, with a wide variety of developmental assistance. I think all of that will be committed at this summit in Chicago. So I'd put Afghanistan at the top of the agenda. Secondly, at the high-tech end of things, NATO will be announcing the initial operating capability of our new missile defense system. This is necessary because many nations are developing, unfortunately, ballistic missiles that potentially could threaten the alliance. But it's also a strong signal of solidarity between the North American partners, the European partners, working together on this new missile defense system, which will be embedded in Europe, both at sea and ashore. So the announcement of this new NATO missile defense system will be a second key item at the summit. Thirdly, I mentioned it earlier, but I think there'll be real focus put on partnerships. In other words, NATO has 28 nations today, but we have many, many partners from around the world: Australia, New Zealand, Tonga, Korea, Singapore, Mongolia. We have partners from around the world, and I think NATO will continue to want to develop those. And here I would really point to the Libyan operation, where we saw 5 Arab nations participating alongside NATO forces in the Libyan operation. And of course, many Arab nations are engaged with us in Afghanistan today, notably Bahrain, UAE, among others. So I think this idea of partnering, Greg, will be a third key item of discussion for the summit. And then fourth and finally, this idea of pooling and sharing our assets together, which we tend to call smart defense, a term that the Secretary General, Anders Fogh Rasmussen, invented. And it's really the idea of nations coming together, working together on systems like the Alliance Ground Surveillance System, like missile defense, like LIFT, like helicopter operations. All of these will be efforts that we'll undertake to create pooling and sharing, which again we call smart defense. So there's 4 topics. I think it'll be a busy summit. I know President Obama is looking forward to hosting his contemporaries. We'll see a new French president in place. It'll be a very exciting summit across the board. The force posture in Europe continues to evolve. If we think back on the height of the Cold War in Europe, we had almost 400,000 U.S. troops. We had 1,200 bases, U.S. bases here in Europe. That number's come way down since the end of the Cold War, down almost 75%. So that today we have about 80,000 troops, and we have really just a few dozen key bases around Europe. I think that posture will continue to evolve as the U.S. undergoes some defense cuts and as we rebalance forces and focus some additional effort on the Pacific and the Middle East. We're going to bring a little bit of a drawdown here in Europe. I think it'll be around 10%. I think it's a balanced and sensible drawdown. And even as we draw down some of the ground forces, we're actually adding ships. We're bringing 4 new Arleigh Burke Aegis destroyers to be home ported in Spain. We're adding special forces capability with new V-22 vertical lift aircraft, as well as bringing in additional technical C2 targeting and intelligence capabilities. So I look at this as a rebalancing of the posture, and I want to conclude by saying that for the United States, our strongest strategic partners remain here in Europe. We see strategic challenge around the world, but for the United States, strategic partnership continues to be embedded here in Europe, in this NATO alliance, with the best pool of partners that we enjoy in one geographic area around the world.